Hello and welcome to today's brochure, and today we're going to be looking at this brochure, which is the new Renault Laguna Coupe. It's actually a hardback brochure, which is quite unusual. This was published, just trying to see if I can find some date markings, November 2008. So the Renault Laguna Coupe was based on the Laguna 3 and actually provided Renault with sort of a halo model, so to speak. It used a variety of engines, diesels and petrols, with the top of the line 3.5 litre V6 petrol coming from Nissan. So it's one of those cars that sort of existed, but nobody really knew that it existed, if that makes sense. People that went for a premium coupe usually went to the Germans, so Mercedes, Audi and BMW, and Renault was overlooked in this sector. But the product that they created is, in my view, absolutely fantastic looking, lovely looking car. I've never had the experience of getting close up to one in the flesh, although I have seen them. I've never actually gone inside one, driven one, etc. But from looks alone, I would sort of be very happy to own a car that looks like this. So they're really going on the sort of whole premium theme in this brochure. I mean, the fact that it's a hardback brochure, for starters, is, you know, sort of is basically sort of narrowing it apart as a premium product in the Renault range. It does look suitably different enough from the normal Laguna to really sort of turn heads and make people realise that you are driving something that isn't just a standard Laguna. The brochure itself is very short on sort of words. It's not really sort of much in the way of text. There's obviously sort of little paragraphs like this, but it is mainly focusing on the aesthetics of the car, such as these sleek LED rear lights, the sleek rear profile of the car, the nice alloy wheels, twin exhausts, etc. And it's been photographed in a number of pretty sort of photogenic locations, just to sort of really show off the car itself. They also seem to have gone for this sort of neutral gunmetal grey colour, which does seem to photograph fairly well. Really is focusing on the car. There isn't really sort of much on the actual car itself. I think when we actually come on to driving pleasure, we may actually find a little bit more information. It's talking about the four-wheel steering system that it uses. It actually uses a system that came from Nissan. I think it's an adaptation of their HiCas system. And rather worryingly, the pages are stuck together, which is always concerning. But I think with this, it's literally just age. And I've just realised why they're stuck together. They're not actually stuck together. It's because you have a full 4-piece fold out of the car itself, with a little bit of information about the four control chassis. A conventionally designed chassis with front wheel steering can give excellent road holding, but for the engineers at Renault, excellent just isn't good enough. They wanted to go even further when it came to control, stability and safety. The outcome of their research is called 4Control, and it delivers a new level of driving pleasure. So if by research you mean diving into Nissan's technical archives and pulling a HiCas steering rack that was fitted to a Z32 off the shelf, then yeah, they have researched it. They've probably researched in what building it's stored in and on what floor. I'm being disingenuous. There is actually quite a bit more research that's gone into it, especially to adapt it to a non-independent rear suspension setup such as the one used on the Laguna, which is always something that has annoyed me about the Laguna 3 and also the, I think the P13 or P13 Primera, is that they had this rear beam set up in a class that was moving away from rear beam setups to a fully independent multi-link setup at the rear. Bit of a disappointment, but I think they got around it certainly with this four-wheel steering to improve handling. There is a big Panhard rod thing on there as well, and it is sort of linked. Well, it's linked 1, 2, 3, 4. Probably it is 5-link rear suspension. So it's not too terrible, but it is a bit of a disappointment when, say, you look at other cars in the class and they're fully independent all round with quite exotic setups at the rear. However, from what I understand, they drive okay. They're not the last word in driving enjoyment, but they're not terrible. And obviously producing a rear end like this does mean you can, to a certain extent, make a lower boot floor, I guess, and also save a lot on production costs. And as GM have proved, certainly in the Astra K, Astra J and Astra K, you can do an awful lot with a rear beam and a Watts linkage. So here it is actually going into a little bit more about the four-wheel steering. So a little bit more information about that is actually there. So they are sort of elaborating slightly on some of the features. Now we're talking about performance and a range of technically advanced punchy engines, including a range of petrols and also a range of diesels. There's also an interesting comparison graph here between the torque characteristics of the 235 brake horsepower diesel versus the 240 brake horsepower 3.5 litre petrol, taken straight out of the 350Z, I think it was, and also many other Nissan vehicles use that engine as well. You can see on the diesel you've got a lovely flat torque curve, which sort of peters off around the typical spot where they do tend to peter off, which is 3,500 RPM, which incidentally is around where peak power is made, so between 3,500 and 3,700 RPM. Whereas the petrol peaks at around 4,200 and produces top power at 6,000 RPM, where torque is actually dropping right off. So really, that is the sort of torque curve you want. You want it to be as flat as possible. However, this is, it's very peaky, so it produces all of its torque nearer the top end, which is, you know, the characteristics of a sportier engine. And it does have a fair amount fairly low down, so it will be sort of quite tractable lower down, but you're not really going to get that full amount of torque until you're sort of reaching sort of the upper end of the rev scale. Certainly around here, you're nearly generating top power right at the very top of the rev range, which, yeah, for a V6 petrol, that's okay. But if you want something that sort of has an executive feel, lots of torque, etc., you'd probably want to go for the diesel. So I think it gives us some figures here. So the V6 DCI is combined with an automatic 6-speed gearbox. So it can deliver a standard of performance of acceleration up to 62 miles an hour in 7.3 seconds, and it can do a quarter mile in 15.25 seconds, which is pretty impressive. It's not bad. We also have a description of the gearboxes that you can have. It looks like you can have 6-speed gearboxes across the range. Also gives us torque figures and other figures for the other engines in the range. The 2-litre turbo actually has quite a nice flat torque curve, with the crossover peak power being developed whilst you still have a fair amount of torque on tap. So from a performance perspective, the 205 brake horsepower 2-litre turbo Might actually be nicer to drive than the V6, normally aspirated petrol. The DCI 180 seems to have quite a nice high amount of power. Torque, peak torque, a relatively flat curve, which really sort of begins to tail off in the late 2000 RPM range. I don't think that would be that pleasant to drive. The V6 diesel would be a lot nicer. Same story here, you are losing that power around sort of 3000 RPM and it really is dropping off there. That's the sort of thing that may be resolved with a second turbocharger, etc., so you can continue to produce boost higher in the range and hopefully sort of keep up those torque figures. But yeah, out of the 2-litre diesels, I wouldn't go for the 2-litre diesel. I'd probably go for that 2-litre petrol and the V6 diesel. So we now focus on certain aspects of the interior, more sort of premium aspects, such as obviously leather interior, electric facilities, nice door trims, nice leather gaiter on the gear stick, Bose sound system, leather rimmed flat bottom steering wheel. All of these sort of little things that people like. And we've got another pull-outy thing. Yes, we do. And yet another photo of the car in a city setting, looking elegant. Again, this really does seem to focus on the aesthetics rather than the features of the car itself. We have a discussion of some of the features that we can actually get. Control system for the sat-nav and other infotainment facilities. The CD system and other bits and pieces related to that. Also on lesser models, the smaller display there, as opposed to the nice large display there if you have the model with the sat-nav. And another double page spread with a nice photo opportunity again. Now we look at comfort, trims and equipment. So this really sort of talks about the fact that you've got the standard dual zone climate control, the cruise control, the radio CD controls there on the steering column, and also comfortable seating in the rear, and obviously sort of focusing on storage as well. And obviously the practicality of the boot, where you can fold the seats flat, giving yourself more space to carry bigger loads, which is quite handy in a coupe such as this if you just have 2 people and you're going away for a weekend or a holiday. Also focusing on safety, such as the active headrests, bi-xenon headlights, the rear LED lights, which are very bright, also a good safety aspect, and the ISOFIX child seat facility. Also the parking sensors as well. Now we've got a nice shot of the dashboard itself, in here shown with the optional sat-nav unit, and the range of interior trims that you can get. So you can have the full black leather, which is standard, the light grey, which is optional, the beige that is optional, and also the camel leather, again optional. That would probably be my choice. I do like interiors which are that sort of colour, so that would probably be the one I would go for personally. Now we have the equipment, so the standard equipment with the core features, the Coupe and Coupe GT features, and the wheels which are available. And then we come on to some of the accessories that you can get, such as the floor mats, boot mats, sport kit front and rear, and I think that's basically this front splitter treatment and this rear diffuser treatment as well. And then we come on to the available colours. 8 colours in total. All of them seem to be sort of very similar shades to each other. They all seem to be the sort of grey tone which is obviously why the car is probably being shown in that colour in the brochure, because that's what it looks best in. I'm not sure if it would look very good in any of these top range of colours here. I'd probably go for one of these shades down here. Yes, that would probably be a little bit boring, but it certainly seems to be what the car looks best in, which is probably why the brochure is trying to point you in that sort of general direction. We have the specifications for the engines here. So that 205 brake horsepower turbo I was interested in develops 300 Newton meters of torque, but it's the way it delivers it. The V6 petrol develops 330 Newton meters of torque, but again it delivers it in a sort of pretty sort of curvy fashion, so to speak. It doesn't deliver it in a nice sort of linear flat curve. Performance wise, the 205 brake horsepower petrol does the 0 to 60 sprint in 7.8, the V6 petrol in 7.4, the V6 diesel in 7.3, and so that's a 0 to 62 sprint rather. So really, you're not really doing much better with the 2-litre diesels. So the ones to really sort of go for if you want the performance is either the V6 diesel or the 2-litre petrol. And to be honest, I know I like larger engines in general, but to be honest with you, looking at the figures here, I would rather go for that 2-litre petrol. You get better fuel economy, and the performance isn't that far off the V6 petrol. You also get lower emissions, so obviously it's going to be cheaper to tax. And if you really want performance with lots of torque, you can go for the V6 diesel, which is 192 grams per 100 kilometres, I guess that probably is, or no, 192 grams per kilometre rather, and it's still bringing in combined cycle of 39.2 versus the 2-litre petrol at 34.4, the V6 petrol at 28.2, and the 150 brake diesel 47.1, the diesel auto with AdBlue 40.3, and the 180 diesel, again probably with AdBlue, is 43.4 combined. So really, I think I'm probably going to have to go out on a limb and say the 2-litre petrol is probably the pick of the range. A few more bits about equipment and options. Then we come through to this final page, or series of pages, which just talks about finance options, ecological footprint according to Renault safe standard in safety, and stuff about their Formula 1 wins, all of that stuff. And that brings us to the end of the brochure. It is quite nice having a hardback brochure. It sort of does make you feel that you are looking at a premium product, sort of nice glossy finish as well. It does focus very much on the aesthetics of the car itself, touches on some of the features, but you sort of have to really sort of read into the features and stats themselves to work out which one is going to be best for sort of your requirements. And there we go. So that's the end of today's brochure. If you have found this interesting, don't forget to hit the like button, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.